as we begin, I do understand that you're having dinner just steps away from where this attack took place overnight. Can you tell me if you saw anything unfold or even just describe the area for me?
Yes, I mean, there was certainly nothing unusual about what we saw. We were just having dinner on Golders Green High Street in a kosher restaurant, which was rammed full of people, as it always is on a Sunday night. But of course, in the current political climate, we're always conscious of the fact that there is some kind of threat against the Jewish community. So, of course, when I woke up this morning and saw that there'd been this attack that resulted in burning in 4 ambulances, of course, that was a deeply distressing thing to see when actually we'd only been just down the road. But of course, unfortunately, while this is shocking, it's actually not too surprising for the Jewish community, not just in the UK, but indeed across the diaspora.
Well, that's a concerning statement in itself. And I feel like I have heard more and more community members saying there's sadness, but there's not shock. Has this kind of an incident become normalized, especially for British Jews?
Well, I think generally what we've seen in the UK and I say across the diaspora is we see spikes in anti-Semitism really rise in proportion to whatever conflict is taking place in the Middle East that involves Israel. I think what makes today's attack particularly worrying is really the level of violence used against what really can only be described as one of the softest possible targets of the UK Jewish community, a charity that really seeks to provide ambulance services for both Jews and non-Jews. And of course, it was only in October in Manchester that we saw a synagogue attack by someone with a car and a knife that resulted in 2 people being killed. So I think really it's the escalation in violence that really is so deeply concerning. But I think this ultimately is only going to reinforce the fears of the British Jewish community that they are not safe. But I think as your report mentioned, I was extremely pleased to see the fact that Hatzalah had raised so much money initially after the attack. And I think really that is the best possible response to this kind of deplorable attempt to intimidate our community, is actually to try to strengthen our community in wake of this. So I think ultimately the best kind of response to this attempt to suppress Jewish life is actually to continue to celebrate Jewish life, particularly in the run-up to the Passover festival.
Continuing to see the community come together, especially after a devastating incident like this. Adam, unfortunately, we are seeing a pattern, it seems, incidents in London, Belgium, the Netherlands. How seriously are authorities in the United Kingdom treating the possibility that this could be some kind of coordinated or even just an attack linked to Iran?
Well, I think currently the identities of the attackers has not currently been confirmed, although the Metropolitan Police seem to believe they know who it is. Of course, this Iranian-backed group has already claimed responsibility, as they have done in other attacks in Europe, but currently the Metropolitan Police can't confirm whether it's actually them. I do think it's important to try to isolate, or certainly when we're talking about anti-Semitism, to separate this kind of organized terrorist activity from really general anti-Semitism that we see in the public. I think really there's a huge amount of debate in the UK with regards to the nature of anti-Semitism really in the UK, really since the 7th of October attacks and the subsequent Gaza war. I think ultimately this attack is only going to reignite those debates. But I think certainly in terms of the response of the authorities, they are treating it as a hate crime, but they've also involved counter-terrorism police as well, which I think really indicates the seriousness of this. But certainly, it's been very visible the streets of London and elsewhere, the fact that the police are taking this threat very seriously. We see much heightened security, physical presence around Jewish sites, which I think is ultimately there to both prevent attacks, but also to try to reassure the Jewish community that the government is taking this seriously. And certainly, it's not just the rise in anti-Semitism from a kind of survey perspective. We've also seen the police charge people who they believe have been trying to plot against the UK Jewish public. So I think this is something that is deeply concerning for the Jewish population. But I think ultimately there are very strong signs that the British government is taking this very seriously.